In this lesson, we are going to put everything together for the end of the chapter. We have already discussed parallel lines and perpendicular lines, so we're just going to revisit them and talk a little bit more about them. We already know that parallel lines mean that they have the same slope. They do not intersect. A slope of 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6 is equivalent to 6/9. I can create the rate of change, rise over run, between any 2 points, and it should be constant. It doesn't matter what 2 points I pick on the line. So if they have the same slope, they are parallel. However, if the slopes are not the same and they are reciprocals of each other, so you can see this red line is 4/3 and this black line here is 3/4. The lines aren't really matching up here. It looks like I messed up a bit, but you get the idea. It's 3/4. And one of them is a negative slope and one of them is a positive slope. They are called opposite reciprocals. So 3/4 is the opposite reciprocal to -4/3. When you have negative opposite, or you have opposite reciprocals, so if it was negative, it's positive, it's negative, they are perpendicular lines to each other. Same thing here. We have -1/3 for the red line, and we have positive 3/1. 3 is the same as 3/1. So -1/3 and 3, which is 3/1, are opposite reciprocals. Therefore, the two lines are perpendicular. So, perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal, parallel lines have the same slope. So if I was to give you the slope of a line, all lines parallel to it, you would just write the exact same slope, because if they're parallel, it's the same slope. If it's a perpendicular line, then you need the opposite reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 3 is 1/3, the opposite sign is negative. The reciprocal of -4/5 is 5/4. The reciprocal of -1 is, well, if you take -1/1, you take the reciprocal, and you take the opposite sign, is just 1. Or in other words, when you multiply opposite reciprocals, you should always get -1. What's the opposite reciprocal of 0, since 0 doesn't have a reciprocal? Well, the slope of 0 is horizontal, right? That's a slope of 0. So perpendicular would be vertical. All vertical lines have undefined slopes. So the slope is undefined. 1/2 would be, take the reciprocal, -2. I wouldn't write over 1. You know it's there, but if it's over 1, you can leave that out, and you change the sign. If I was to tell you that two slopes are parallel, and one of the slopes had a missing parameter, a missing number within the fraction, you could find that missing number by simply knowing that they're parallel and making them equivalent to each other. So since 3 is the same as -6/k, we can just use an equal sign. And that makes them equal proportions. You can make it 3/1. You could just say, well, how am I getting from one fraction to the next? I'm multiplying by -2, so I need to multiply by -2. Or you could cross multiply. 3k equals -6, and you could solve it. Oh, k is -2. Either way. Same thing here. They are parallel, so they're the same. Whenever you have a negative sign, I always move the negative to the numerator. Pick one of them. Typically, it's always the numerator. So equals -k/15. And again, you could try to figure out how you're getting there, making them equivalent, or you could cross multiply. -6k equals 15 times 5. Divide both sides by 6. I get k equals 12.5. And negative divided by negative is a positive. So k does not have to be an integer value. It could be a fraction, a decimal, etc. What happens if these two slopes are perpendicular to each other? They are no longer equal to each other. In fact, one slope is the opposite reciprocal of the other slope. So what I do is I create an equation by taking the opposite reciprocal. So I take one of the slopes, I make it its opposite reciprocal, 1/5 negative. I took the opposite reciprocal of that, Now, it's kind of like if I had two perpendicular lines and I took the opposite or reciprocal of one of them, they'd now both be parallel. So now you can say they are equal. So I just take the opposite reciprocal of one of them and then make it equal and do exactly what I was doing in the last question. I would solve. Negative 5k equals negative 3, divide both sides by negative 5, and I would get k is 3 over 5. Same thing here, pick one of the two slopes. Since they're perpendicular to each other, I take the opposite reciprocal and I make them now equal. 3k equals 12, k equals 4. Given an equation, you should be able to find the slope of any line parallel or perpendicular to this. First thing you need to know is you need to know what is the slope, and you do not know the slope unless it's in slope-intercept form. So I have to change this into slope-intercept form. 3y equals negative 2x plus 12, divide everything by 3. I get y equals negative 2/3 x plus 4. I now know the slope of this line is negative 2 over 3. So the slope of a line parallel to this is exactly the same, negative 2 over 3. The slope of any line perpendicular to that one would be its opposite reciprocal. So I now know the slope of all lines perpendicular to that, and I know the slope of all lines parallel to that line. These ones are worked out because we've been working on these lots lately, so I'm just going to review. Now I'm just going to tie it all together. What if I asked you to find the equation of a line? Instead of saying it has the same slope or it has this slope, I just tell you it's perpendicular to a certain line and it passes through a certain point. Well, if you know it's perpendicular to this line, and this one is in slope-intercept form, you now know the slope. Well, if the slope is 1 over 3, then the perpendicular slope is going to be negative 3. So that's why I used negative 3 slope, perpendicular slope, and we have our point. And then I just went through and I used my slope point form. And it looks like I found the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. I could have put it in general form as well. This question didn't ask, so I got to choose. Another one, same thing. Determine the equation of a line perpendicular to this line and has an x-intercept of negative 3. Well, if it's perpendicular to this line, we need to know the slope first. Whenever you see perpendicular or parallel, you think slope. So what is the slope? I put it into slope-intercept form. I get negative 1/2 as the slope of the line, so again, I need to use the perpendicular slope. I take the reciprocal and the opposite. So 2 is the slope I'm going to use. Again, the x-intercept of negative 3 means negative 3 is x when y is 0. And again, I used my slope point form, plugged it in, and I now have the equation of a line, and this one's in y equals mx plus b. I could also write it in ax plus by plus c equals 0, both ones. All right, so that's just a quick review of parallel and perpendicular lines that you can practice on your assignment.